Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Good afternoon and welcome to the next edition of the podcast. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today I am delighted to introduce you to Tristan Allen. Welcome to the show, Tristan.
Hello, nice to be here.
Wonderful, thank you for coming on. Before I start and we get into the interview, we like to just do a quick snapshot of everybody's sort of CV and career to date, just to explain and highlight some of the reasons why we've asked you to come on to the show. So is that okay if I just quickly run through that
Yeah, sure.
with you? And as per normal, I grabbed all of this off Google and LinkedIn. So if any of it is incorrect or I pronounce anything incorrectly, do tell me. So for you, your career has actually been very interesting because actually it didn't start off in sort of tech or engineering as sorts. It actually started off at Golden Wonder back in the 80s as a national account manager. And then you transitioned to an organisation called Baco Consumer Products as a national account controller, and then sort of moved up to Alcoa,
an Indian company of America.
Okay. Again, as a sort of technical and product development director, then became commercial director of an organisation called Time Strip.
Yeah.
You've done your own consultancy work, had a little period of time in sort of early 2010. And then from sort of 2011 to 2014, you provided sort of consultancy services across both consumer health and pharmaceuticals.
Indeed.
Yeah. And then in 2014, saw the birth of Room 44.
Yes.
Which is your business where you are a sort of partner of and an innovation consultant.
Indeed, yeah.
You, from a personal perspective, you live in the area, so you live just outside Silverstone. You live in between sort of Buckingham and Silverstone.
About 6 miles away from here, yeah.
Okay, great. Where you've lived for the last sort of 20 years, raising sort of family, which is wonderful, and we'll come on to sort of background in due time. And you are, importantly, you are a Silverstone Technology Cluster member.
Have been since almost it started, yeah.
Fantastic, which we'll get on to as well. Which is ultimately how we met through the sort of events that we both attend, which is wonderful. So thank you. That's sort of just initial background of Tristan. Sure. Let's get into the interview. So what I'd love to understand and what I'd love our listeners to learn is more about Room 44. So in a nutshell, sort of what is it that you do? Why do you do it? And how can you help fellow businesses within the Silverstone area, but also those outside of the area listening to this podcast right now?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So Room 44 is an innovation agency. We started back in 2014, but have really only been going seriously for the last couple of years. We specialise in reading trends, mega trends, macro trends, signals of emerging technology, and we help clients to see a different vision of what their future may look like. So if a client, for example, makes a thing today, but we see a macro trend occurring at their invitation, which may need them to redesign, modify, change what they do to be relevant in a future market, we help them to see that endpoint sooner than they would otherwise.
Okay.
That gives them a strategic endpoint, and from the 2 points on that timeline, where they are to where they want to be, they can plot their roadmap, which makes it easier to develop a product over time because you can evolve it rather than have to snap your knees and do something very quickly as the market changes around you. We apply a methodology that's known as design thinking. So it's a very consumer-centric view of the world. We try and recognise what unmet needs there are around, and then we tie back to what a customer may be doing and help them modify it again to meet that need as it evolves also.
Okay.
So it's all about future strategy, thinking about what's happening down the line. And we all think, because we're consumers, before we're patients or we need services particularly, we think like consumers, as if we're walking around Tesco's. We think that the brands that we're buying have all this stuff taped. We just think that because they're on the shelf and they look successful, that brands know what's going on. But in actual fact, if you ask a CEO what their strategic plan looks like, they will say, oh yeah, it's 5 years. Dig into the detail of that, and very rarely can you get anybody to describe exactly what's going to happen for the next beyond 12 months.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, sure. And so how do you as an organisation identify those trends and the macros that you mentioned earlier? Presumably there's a research process that you go through to look at that.
I think the first thing we do differently to the way that companies approach their problems for themselves is just we're very naive. We don't have the same inherent preconceptions of a market as a company owner or a company team has. If you've worked in confectionery all your life, you know that things have gone from being wrapped in silver foil and wrapped in paper to being wrapped in an L-sealed bit of plastic today.
Sure.
And you know what the print methods are. But you don't necessarily think beyond that. So when the circular design issue raises its head and you've got to stop using plastic, you've got to approach that issue from the consumer's end. Why does a consumer have to buy a Mars bar wrapped in plastic? Well, it's because that's what Mars make. It's not what the consumer wants necessarily. It's not what the environment wants. So we would question that. So we just start from that very objective and naive perspective. Say, what does the consumer actually want this thing to deliver them? What's the value in this that the brand isn't seeing today?
Okay, so thank you. And how else do you support the business sort of on that journey? So you've said presumably there's a sort of discovery phase where you'll go in and meet and understand and learn about them as a business and a brand and what their potential strategy, their 5-year strategy has been, but dig into the reality that it's actually probably no longer than a year. What's then the typical journey that you take that business on? If you could explain, what would they experience through what you do?
Engagement with us. So there are a number of techniques we can employ.
Right.
The first thing that we would probably do with a team is take them away and sit them in a corner individually and talk to them.
Okay.
Because just by gaining a picture of an individual's perspective on what it is that they do and what could be done differently, that's a conversation that never happens in a boardroom.
Yes, true.
Bring that back to the table collectively, and you've already got a data set which has been something they haven't seen before.
Yes. Now,
and it's not market research. Market research, by its very essence, is historical. Data has to have happened in order for it to have been recorded, and we're trying to envisage what the consumer's going to want in the future. So you can't keep looking back. You can see cycles, you can see things happening cyclically, and we can't ignore those things. But talk to the people first, understand what their individual perceptions are, and then go away and look at the market, as I said, naively and objectively. Those two data sets in themselves are quite powerful. And then you transpose that to become a set of data that you view from the perspective of the consumer, and you've just done 3 things that a company rarely does for itself. Now, we wouldn't claim to be the only people that do this.
Of course.
But I'm fairly sure this isn't a conversation that gets vocalised very often. If you go to a market research company, they won't talk like this. Go to a larger global consultancy, they won't talk like this.
Why?
Because they have methods. They have a larger consultancy, in my experience, tends to have a process which it sticks to. Not going to be too negative about consultancies because they're far more successful than we are just now, but they impose a cookie cutter process sometimes, which doesn't suit the need necessarily. It may be very successful and it may have proven benefits, but an example would be if you get a firm in that's very good at lean manufacturing. Great. You go through the lean manufacturing process. We all know where it comes from. It comes from Toyota back in the 80s, and it becomes lean, and you take stock out of the system, and you cut people out of your system, you cut your costs, you improve internal communications, you may improve your machine utilization percentages. Great. All savings. Stop needing to scrap up off the floor. Fabulous. Once that's done, and that saving has hit the EBITDA line on the spreadsheet, you can't save it again.
Yes.
You can benefit from that reduction in cost into your product cost going forward, but it's a lost saving once it's been done once. We try and take a more strategic view and look at the top line more than the bottom line, and try and drive growth based on what consumers want you to make, not what you want to sell them. And that's the old adage, really, is helping customers or clients to make what they can sell rather than sell what they can make.
Yeah, very good. Very good. And presumably within your sort of service, you also provide mentorship to the people that you work with. Talk to me, is that true? And if so, sort of talk to me about that. What do you do, and how can you help sort of coach and educate the business leaders and the boards and the management teams to actually achieve growth, as you've said? Well,
the basis of the business that we run is very relationship led.
Okay.
We get to know people. I get to know people. We're not a big team. We have associates that work with us. They'll find that's the best way of doing it. I don't think it's terribly effective to say to a client, I've got a room full of 12 people, we can do anything you want. If we see a client need and we agree to work on a project, let's go and resource it appropriately for the need.
Sure.
Every project is different.
Yeah.
Because every client is.
Remain nimble.
Yeah, exactly. So we offer one-to-one relationship advice. We offer mentorship. Sometimes that's required and it's desirable. Sometimes it isn't. We run training programs. We have our own program of workshops that we run, which takes people through the design thinking process effectively. But it's broken down into 3 modules. So we help people to know how to identify trends, to see what's coming down the line. We help them to create a design thinking based strategy. And then we help them to figure out how to make that strategy stick internally. And very often it's the internal conversation where great ideas fall over, because companies are very good at doing what they're set up to make. They do the thing they've been established to do. They're not very good at changing very often.
Of course.
And it's the change that we're trying to affect here, so that they're relevant for the future.
Yeah, removing inertia.
Yeah.
Keep doing what they're usually doing.
There's a phrase that I write about in my blog. I've used it a few times, and I pinched it from somebody else, but it says the siren song of what we know. It's a very strong sound just to go back and do nothing. But actually, the point of this interview really, I suppose, is that the world is changing so quickly, and the development of technology is outstripping the ability of manufacturers to design it into products. So the eye of the question that we should be looking into isn't what's going to change, it's what's not going to change.
Yeah, great. Fascinating. And so the workshops which you've mentioned, so you basically, there's a sort of 3-pronged attack with that. So to talk to me about those again. So you've got. So
we set people up in order when they come into a room, and we do this as an open training workshop, or we do it as a company-based event, and that's great too, because you get cross-functionality in both situations. We try and get people to look at the world from a position they don't do every day. As soon as you walk through a door into an office from the car park, you become this person that works for a company. You stop being you as a consumer. And yet you, Chris, you're a focus group in your own right. You're a consumer of cars and toothpaste and ties, maybe not ties, but socks and pants and chocolate. You're all these things to different people, who, depending on who's asking the question. And we tend to forget that the way that we consume stuff is quite important to our development of understanding how our markets respond.
Yeah.
So let's start with that. If I don't like a certain cereal because it's too loaded with sugar, I'll stop buying it. If I've stopped buying it and I make the stuff, that's probably going to be a sentiment that's carried through into the marketplace. So why would you ignore it? So so the first thing we do is to treat data, get people to value data from sources that they don't normally accept it from. Everybody in a company, every brand manager that's ever walked through the door of a company has come from somewhere with other industry knowledge. You brought them in because you want to exploit that. you've sat them down, they've been and bought market data for the launch of this great new thing. Once that's launched, then it goes into a drawer or onto a C drive or a cloud drive, never to be looked at again.
Right.
Well, let's release all that stuff. Let's get that data out of the C drives and put it into a database, and let's crawl it discreetly so we can release value from an investment you made a little while ago. Because actually, customers haven't changed a huge amount over the years. They're still the same people doing the same thing. You know, we walk, we talk, we go to work, we do all the stuff that we've always done. We raise kids. So there is some value in that. And then we try and get them to look to the future. And a case study that I've written about recently as well is sitting here where we are today. We listen to conversations about high-tech development and high-performance tech. And one of the conversations that happened recently in the technology cluster, for example, was, well, if electric vehicles are mandated to be the only new cars available for sale in the not too distant future, and if Scotland's got it right, it's going to be 15 years of now. Okay, so 15 years of now, internal combustion engines won't be a thing. They'll be around still, but they won't be new things. The stock won't be getting replenished. The UK's stock of cars is thought to churn every 20 years. So we're looking at the end of that cycle from now. People come into the driving market all the time, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that we get a new stock of drivers every 10 years. By the time all new cars are electric, people won't, the new people coming into that market won't ever have driven an internal combustion engine.
No.
They will be learning to drive single pedal probably on a brand new car. So they won't want to drive Porsches that you see on the track now because they won't know how to, unless they're enthusiasts. So there's a market in decline. Now, if your internal combustion engine supply chain is in compression already, but you haven't seen it, it's a really good time to start doing something about it. So you need to see the trend.
Yes.
The componentry that goes into an internal combustion engine, the exhaust pipes and the gas tanks and the fuel gauges and all the stuff you get under the bonnet, aren't going to be needed anymore in the same quantities they are today. I don't know why I'm saying this, and I don't hear manufacturers saying it back to us, but the growth of products like electric transmissions and all the stuff that goes under the bonnet of an EV, that's in growth. Okay. So we've seen a strategic trend there, and just because we viewed it differently, the manufacturer now has an idea that they may need to change. So if you bend pipes and you make exhaust pipes, maybe you want to do something else with that kit, or think again about what your factory's going to do.
Yes.
Beyond this, there's a whole other area of impact on the market more generally. As a consumer, if you buy an electric vehicle, you'll probably charge it at home and charge it at the office. And because the battery is going to be so efficient in 10 years' time, it's going to do 300 miles plus, or so we think. We don't know what fast charging facilities we need yet, because the battery is going to run from one end of the country to the other. We don't need to stop unless we need to go to the loo. Now that in itself is interesting, because if we're not stopping for petrol or diesel, when are we going to walk past the convenience store fixtures for Mars bars and crisps and pork pies and Lucozade?
Indeed.
We just aren't.
Yeah.
Now you can imagine that the confectionery brands can put a fixture into the aisle that you're going to walk through from the front door to the loo in the service station, but it's a different environment. You're not standing there doing the same thing. And we think as consumers that manufacturers have all this stuff in mind and in the plan. I'd challenge that and suggest that maybe those bigger brands haven't thought that stuff through yet. Wow. And if the market's going to change in 15 years' time, it's changing now. Yeah,
you need to innovate now or potentially die in the future, I guess.
The market is currently, for electric vehicles or hybrids, about 2 in 10 of new cars sold, between 1 and 2 in 10. And in roughly 15 years' time, it's going to be 10 in 10. There's a lot of stuff going to change in the next 15 years. Strategically, these things can be mapped, but you have to start looking at the signals. So coming back to your question, how do we help? That's the conversation we would have. And it's challenging, and it's intense, and it's a bit uncomfortable, but it has to be had, I think, anyway.
No, I'd agree. Thank you. That's insightful, really, really good. And certainly for the listeners, and indeed those on site who haven't worked with you yet or are still learning, huge value in that relationship.
Thanks.
And from the fact that we're actually sat in Innovation Centre right now, on Silverstone Park, we're both part of the Silverstone Technology Cluster, so my business Longhurst is also a member, but you joined it 2 years ago.
We're into our second year anyway.
Yeah. What's it been like? What's been your personal experience of the cluster, fellow members, the community? How's it been?
I think you get out of it what you put in. I think if you don't come to special interest group meetings and you don't listen to things that don't necessarily sit within your realm of activity, you're not going to learn broadly about the development of high performance tech. You have to come and listen and be a part of it and have your say. I presented at SIG events because we're a performance business, because I think that we have something to add to the conversation. I usually have an opinion about whatever's said in the meeting. Sorry, Pim, but I do. And by turning up and voicing those opinions, I think it adds to the richness of the community.
Sure.
We will continue to be a member, because as far as insight goes, I learn an awful lot by coming and listening to very clever people talk about their specialisms, which I have no knowledge of at all. But once I've heard the conversation, I may not know what they all mean, but I know some of the words. There's quite a lot, and I'll go away and dig into it and research it afterwards, because I'm that sort of animal.
Yeah.
But the community is interesting. It's a broad church of people. As I said, some of the conversations are a bit beyond everybody,
of course,
because there's a lot of specialism in the room.
Yeah.
Metrology, for example, is not something that I know that much about, but I know more about it now than I did before I went to the meetings to learn about it.
Yeah, because you committed time to it.
Yeah. So I think if you invest in it, it can benefit you, and it can benefit from you being there.
And for the people listening, if you could, in sort of one sentence, if possible, if they're not part of Silverstone Park at the moment, and not necessarily part of Silverstone Technology Cluster, but they have a sort of niche in tech and engineering or potential interest, why should they consider either A, commercially working alongside businesses here and our fellow businesses, and B, potentially even consider joining and becoming part of the community? How would you, if you could, sort of in a nutshell, explain why they should do that?
I think the people should not get too hung up by the technology part of the label over the door. I think the business community here is growing and is becoming more diverse. People like us turn up, and we're not a high performance tech orientated at all. As I've said a couple of times, we learn from it and we use the insight we gather from being here. You've got recruitment companies on site. You've got FMCG data management businesses on site. You've got companies here that are adding to the breadth of specialisms. And so I wouldn't be put off by if there is a preconception of this place being automotive biased. It probably is today, but that's not how it's going to be for long. So I think it's a vibrant community. It's growing, and it's easy to get to, isn't it?
Yeah, I say this in every interview. Geographically, centre of England, it's wonderful. You've got the commuter links via train, via motorway, and clearly in the beautiful South Northamptonshire countride.
Well, I think it's important as well to note that we're in the middle of the growth corridor.
Yes,
we've got the Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor. There's an industrial strategy around that. Let's not miss the opportunity that exists there. It's an area of high investment, and it's a wealthy area already, both in terms of money and technological develment. So there's an asset to exploit here, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. So it's got it all, really.
Yeah, entirely agree. As I said previously, exactly why we've opened Longhurst on site, and here it's fantastic opportunity, and even with our just short time that we've been here, the relationships and the friendships that we've already built, feel family-like, and I can only see that growing and enhancing moving forward. So yeah, completely endorse everything you've just said. So what I'd love to learn a little bit more about, Tristan, if that's okay, is a little bit more about you.
Okay.
If that's okay. And so the first thing I'd love to learn a little bit more about, and it might be a bit of a shock or an unknown to our listeners, is that you're a bit of a surfer.
I'm a bit of a surfer. Yeah.
So you're born and raised down in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Beautiful part of the country.
Yeah, a bit impoverished, but nice place to be sometimes.
Well, yeah, it's yeah, wonderful place when the weather's nice.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And you used to surf down there?
I did as a kid until I left back in the 80s. I surfed regularly.
Yeah.
Well, what I will call surfing isn't quite what my surfing buddies might call surfing, but you know, I used to go out and paddle a lot.
Yeah.
And I've kept my boards and I've kept a hand in, and I still do it occasionally. I went down last weekend with my daughter to North Devon actually, and we tried.
Lovely.
And I've set myself a little target for the next 18 months. I'm going to enter a longboard surf contest, so that's my new ambition.
Well, we need to first of all get pictures of that, and also an update on how you get on.
Yeah,
If
I get on, it'd be great.
Well, so as and when we get you back on the podcast, love to find out about that. And so obviously, so you left. So just picking up on what you've said, so you left sort of Cornwall in the 80s, and presumably have been in and around sort of Buckinghamshire, Northamptonshire ever since.
Moved to Watford. Well, moved to Leighton Buzzard, then to Watford.
Okay.
Ran a patch in North London during my sort of my Golden Wonder days.
Okay.
They had a head office in Market Harbour at the time, so there was quite a lot of up and down the motorway.
Sure.
Then I went to Baco, who were in Amersham, and worked my way through the sales and marketing parts of that business, and ended up the company was bought and sold twice while I was there, and I was on the management team that sold it the last time before I left. So I was a technical director then and product innovation director. That was quite interesting. I was there for a long time. I was with Baker for about 14 years actually. Okay. So quite a long time. Then I left, had a bit of a career break, and I started my own chicken farm, which was a bit of a diversion.
Okay, so this just because everyone's going to want to know about this. So chicken farm. So
it's in the family.
Right. Okay. So there was some history before.
Yeah.
So you had some experience. It wasn't that you just suddenly decided that I'm just going to learn about chickens.
Well, it was actually.
Right.
I just got a bit tired of doing the company thing, and well, that was about as extreme as I could find. We were going to emigrate at one point, and we ended up emigrating quarter of a mile around the corner.
Okay.
Just moved into a different
complete
house.
Lifestyle change.
Yeah, completely.
Just complete switch off from everything you've been doing before.
Well, it wasn't really a switch off, because you soon find that although in normal working life you go to work whatever the hours are that you work, when you're running livestock you don't stop.
No, of course.
And
constant.
you spend all your life in the field. So the kids and the family may be in the house, but you're in the field with a tractor. And so it wasn't actually a career break as such. It was just shoveling different sorts of.
yeah, understood. But again, from what you do now, you know, a different type of wisdom learned and lessons learned by doing that, even just from a life transitional perspective. So the families that we work through that will go through a potential career change, even if it's just a temporary one, for whatever reason existed behind it, to then do it, to then change, which you presumably then did a few years later. You know, you've continued your journey up to where you are now, where you're providing a consultancy service where, you know, you're doing things differently, and you are practicing what you preach, in that you clearly done that through your own life, and using that knowledge and potentially that foresight to be able to help disrupt conventional thinking, certainly when it comes to innovation and growing your business, but also I probably suggest personally.
I think it's really interesting parallel actually, because people don't imagine that farming is a terribly technological market, but it is.
Sure.
And lots of the things that we see in common usage today have been developed in other markets. And you look at Formula One and you see a fly-by-wire from back in whenever it was, and you think, oh, yeah, it's in my Ford Sierra, you know, or whatever, the Ford Mondeo, sorry. Sierra's a bit old. But you look at farming, and farmers have a very, very long view of things. They plan over a very long cycle.
Yes.
It's not to a 12-monthly plan. You know, even back in history, people used to have planting cycles and fallow fields.
Yes.
Over you did that in first year history probably. The science and chemistry and agronomy that goes into farming today, and the kit that's used is extraordinary. The GPS was in John Deere tractors long before it was in SatNav.
Wow.
It just was. So I kind of learned by shoveling chickens around that you've got to take a longer view. And I think that I take the view as well that if you are going to see things differently, as you said, you've got to experience it. Otherwise, you can't empathise with the market you're in. I think there's a difference between empathy and rational sympathy. I think it's very hard to empathise in every situation, because in pharmaceuticals, for example, market research may say it empathises with that particular patient's condition, but it's not. It's a rational sympathising of that person's situation. So I think you have to see. Well, my strapline is seeing it differently.
Okay.
So thank you for that little plug. But you have to. One has to walk the walk, I think, and more so now, as generations are living longer, their careers are getting longer. If you look at our kids and our children's life expectancy, it's going to be 100 years plus.
Yes.
They are going to have careers that are let's just give it in round numbers. They come out of university, they're going to have an 80-year career. They're not going to have the pension facilities that our parents had with their final salary arrangements. They just won't have those. In 80 years, you've got the time to do a lot of different stuff. You haven't got to work for the same corporation for 80 years and work your way up through the organogram. You can have significant career changes. And we're seeing that in people's work histories now. Look at anybody's CV that comes through the door.
Sure.
They're very different than the way that things used to be.
Yeah, no longer is there the sort of forever company. I think, as you've said, people would be relatively institutionalised and remain in the business for 30, 40 years. I think that is slowly starting to end. I've got a number of clients who have done that and they've come out and they've retired. But you're right, it's becoming less and less, which is a positive thing. I think change is a good thing. It helps businesses grow because they're bringing other people in that have had experiences at other firms, potentially different industries, different sectors, different geographic locations. Totally endorse that. And so bring it back just briefly before we close off the interview in due time. So just the family pieces. So you live, just so we can focus on the regional piece. So you live locally. So you live
near Buckingham.
Live near Buckingham. Lived there for sort of 20 odd years.
Yeah.
What keeps you here in the area?
That's a really good question, because being Cornish, I always have this sort of hankering to go home.
Okay.
But whenever I go back, I realise that actually we've just moved on now. I think we have family, we have roots, we have friends, we have community. We've got quite deep connections with people and places now in the area that we live in. And I've had holiday homes in the past, which I've let go because I think there's a lot of the world to see. It doesn't really matter where you base yourself. You can get to anywhere within a day's travelling. So you may as well be here as anywhere else, actually. And it's a nice part of the world to be in. We're very emotionally connected to the area for various reasons.
Sure.
Our circle of friends is here. Our business is here. It could have been anywhere else, but it's here. So, why? It sounds a bit blasé to say why change, because everything changes. I've said that a few times, and we will morph and change with it. But you've got to give yourself roots somewhere. Yeah. I think there is another argument. I mean, if you listen to people in the podosphere now, there's quite a lot of talk about destuffication and living off 30 items and in a rucksack and Airbnb-ing it, and that's great. And I think we will also see industry changes, because people that live like that, and we could have another conversation about that sometime, will need different insurance policies and different living arrangements and different car access to transportation. Those are all structural things and infrastructure things that are going to develop over time too. But for us, because we are the age we are, and we've lived in the last 20 years to get to this point, we're happy where we are. Thanks. Good. Yeah, as I said, we I love the area. I think South Northamptonshire, Buckinghamshire is a fantastic area. Lots of wonderful places to visit, some great businesses, and as we've discussed, the whole Silverstone region is highly attractive for a number of reasons. So I can understand why you've remained local. One of the key things that I want to try and sort of get out of everybody that I'm meeting and interviewing is to help share insight and knowledge into sort of key lessons that you've learned along your career, but also maybe personal journey as well. Because we're all human. We're all going through different things in life. We're all on our own journey, and certainly professionally,
We will hit the occasional bump and bruise along the journey, which is part of the journey and how you get better and you pivot and learn and excel and become a master in your field, which we all are, respectfully. However, sometimes we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And sometimes those mistakes can be funny and indeed even embarrassing if we're prepared to be brave enough to admit it. And so I'd always put across this question saying, is there anything that's ever happened professionally for you that business-wise, strategically, that's been actually a bit of an embarrassing mistake, but one that you look back on and think, actually, okay, so that was, that was a bit of a prat there, or that was a bit of a stupid decision, but actually it was a key learning point, and we were able to pivot and learn because of this.
Yeah.
Is there anything in your sort of back catalogue that you could sort of share with us?
Yeah, I think just to paraphrase it, is don't blag it.
Don't blag it. Great one.
I think, I've stood up to be a best man before and haven't prepared the speech terribly well, and it's just gone like a lead balloon at a family reunion. It's just not a great thing to do,
Imagine.
And when you get up on the stage sometimes to speak in public, if you haven't prepared appropriately, it's not going to go well.
You get found out.
You do.
Yeah.
So I think you can be authentic and be genuine, but know what you're there for and understand the value that is expected of you.
Have you got any a story, anything where that actually happened to you?
Well, the best man thing was one of my. It's still something. It happened back in Cornwall before I left, actually, and I wake up in a cold sweat sometimes just for the memory of it. So I'm not going to go into that just now. But that was, I should have learnt by that, and I didn't always, and I have now.
Well, best man speech. I've been fortunate enough to be best man a few times, and horrendous experience being a best man. It's I can't wait to eventually make one of my best friends do it and serve him right.
You find you haven't got any then.
Oh, indeed. Cool. Okay, great. Well, that's a great example. And one thing for me personally, and selfishly actually, as the podcast host, is I want to learn something from you, and I want to get some insight that you think would be valuable to me as Chris Broome, sort of business owner. So again, based on business experience, life experience, can be either, and not using the blagging example. Is there anything that you could share with me that you think would help me on my own sort of professional or personal journey?
When you're looking around the internet and you see stuff, these clever quotes from clever people, it's very tempting to latch onto one of those, and I did, I'm afraid. But it's also the strapline on my Skype profile. Okay. And it came from Karl Marx. Okay. And he just said, question everything. And I've held that true ever since I read it. Nothing necessarily is as it seems. So question absolutely everything. And by doing that, of course, you then lead on to other questions, and we get to where my business is founded on that, on that principle. Just don't take what you see as being the absolute truth. Dig into it a bit. Brilliant piece of advice. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
So that's the end of the interview. So Tristan, thank you so much for coming on.
It's been fun, thanks.
Yeah, it's been good. It's insightful. I definitely want to get you back on in the future. I'm really fascinated to dig more into sort of disruptive and disruptors and the fact that we're in tech and innovation and really how businesses need to be thinking to, as I've said previously, sort of innovate or die. And I think it's a fascinating conversation that, in fact, you could do a whole podcast series on it. So definitely want to bring you on back for that, if that's okay. Yeah, and thank you for your time. So obviously for everybody listening, I'll be putting Tristan's company details, so Room 44 Innovates on. I'll be putting that information, his contact information, within the show notes, so there's easy access to locate him, but obviously also available on, you can find him on the Silverstone Technology Cluster website directory, and clearly social media, LinkedIn, etc. So if you want to sort of reach out and touch base with Tristan for any reason, commercially or otherwise, then we'll make that easily accessible for you. So again, Tristan, thank you so much for coming on, and look forward to seeing you around at some of the next STC networking events.
Me too. Thanks a lot.
Cheerio.
Bye.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.